At 5:40 a.m., the door clicked open as quietly as guilt would allow. Hannah Whitmore lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting every second between her breaths. She had not slept all night. The house was still, wrapped in that fragile silence that only exists before sunrise. Even the city outside their Manhattan apartment seemed to be holding its breath. Julian slipped inside, shoes in hand, suit jacket folded over his arm. The faint smell of someone else's perfume followed him in like an uninvited witness. He paused when he saw Hannah's eyes open in the dark. "You're up early," he said, forcing a smile. His voice sounded practiced, too smooth. Hannah said nothing. She had learned that silence kept the peace. Silence kept the family together, or so she believed. Julian moved toward the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter like a man who had nothing to hide. "Long night," he added. "The deal ran late." Hannah nodded slowly. Her hand rested on the couch cushion where their son had fallen asleep hours earlier, waiting for his father. Eli had refused to go to bed. He had said heroes worked late. Heroes didn't quit. Julian didn't notice the iPad on the coffee table. He didn't notice the faint glow of the screen that had already gone dark. He walked past Hannah, brushed her shoulder, and headed to the bedroom without a second glance. Just like that, he believed the night was over. Erased, forgotten. But upstairs, in the quiet room filled with school drawings and unfinished Lego towers, something had already escaped into the world. Earlier, while Hannah sat frozen on the couch and the sky slowly turned gray, Eli had done what children do best. He had trusted. He had believed. He had wanted to make his father proud. With small fingers and a tired smile, he had opened an app he barely understood. He typed a simple sentence, the kind that breaks hearts because it is pure. "My hero is still working so late. I'll stay awake with Mom." He didn't know the iPad shared more than words. He didn't know it shared location. He didn't know honesty could travel faster than lies. By the time Julian closed the bedroom door behind him, that post had already begun its quiet journey. And Hannah had no idea her son had just pressed the button that would destroy everything they were trying to protect. What neither of them knew was that the internet had already connected the dots, and it would not be merciful. By 6:18 a.m., the post had 10 likes. By 6:24, it had 100 views. Hannah didn't notice any of it at first. She was still sitting on the couch, staring at the blank television screen, replaying Julian's calm voice in her head. "Long night. The deal ran late." The same sentence he had used before, always the same rhythm. Always said like truth was a habit. Eli slept curled beside her, his small hand gripping the edge of her sweater. Hannah gently brushed his hair back, unaware that the quiet moment she was protecting no longer belonged only to them. On the iPad, notifications multiplied. Someone shared the post, then someone else did. A stranger commented, "That's sweet." Another wrote, "Kids deserve better." Then, one person noticed something small in the corner of the screen. A tiny gray line of text most people ignored. Location: the Plaza Hotel, Manhattan. At 6:41 a.m., the tone of the comments changed. "That's not an office. Why is a kid's GPS at a hotel? Anyone else seeing this?" Screenshots started circulating. The image jumped from a child's account to private group chats, then to public feeds. A financial blogger with a modest following reposted it with a single line. "Interesting timing." Unquote. By the time Hannah's phone buzzed, the internet had already begun asking questions she wasn't ready to hear. Her sister-in-law's name flashed on the screen. Hannah hesitated before answering. "Have you seen what people are saying?" the woman asked, voice tight. "Seen what?" Hannah replied, confused. There was a pause, then a sharp inhale. "Hannah, your son's post. It's everywhere." Hannah's heart dropped. She opened the app, hands trembling. The comments loaded slowly, each one heavier than the last. She scrolled in disbelief, watching strangers analyze her child's words, her husband's absence, their family's private life. Then she saw it, the location tag. Her breath caught. The room felt suddenly too small. The truth she had been avoiding all night now stared back at her in cold, digital certainty. This wasn't a rumor. It wasn't suspicion. It was proof. Upstairs, Julian slept peacefully, unaware that his reputation was unraveling minute by minute. Downstairs, Hannah covered her mouth to keep from making a sound that might wake Eli. Tears blurred her vision, not from shock, but from something deeper. Realization. She hadn't exposed him. She hadn't accused him. She hadn't said a word. Their child had. And the world was listening. As the post crossed 1,000 shares, one comment rose to the top, pinned by someone Hannah didn't know. Kids tell the truth, adults try to bury. Hannah stared at the screen, realizing for the first time that silence would no longer protect anyone. Because the truth had already escaped, and it was moving faster than Julian ever could. By mid-morning, Manhattan had already made up its mind. What started as a single screenshot from a child's account was no longer just a family matter. It had slipped into places Hannah had never imagined. Finance forums, industry group chats, anonymous gossip pages followed by assistants, analysts, and junior partners who watched powerful men for a living. Someone zoomed in on the timestamp. Someone else compared it with public guest records. Another person noticed something worse. Julian Whitmore had been scheduled to speak at an internal strategy call at exactly 5:30 a.m. The call log showed he never joined. By 9:12 a.m., a thread appeared titled simply, "Whitmore, anyone else seeing this?" Hannah sat at the small kitchen table, laptop closed, phone face down. She hadn't told Julian yet. She didn't know how, or if she should. Every instinct she had spent years developing told her to wait, to stay quiet, to let him control the damage like he always did. But the city was moving faster than her fear. A former intern commented anonymously, "He missed 2 early calls this quarter. Same excuse. Late negotiations." Another replied, "Check the GPS. That's not a boardroom." The story mutated. No one cared about the child anymore. They cared about hypocrisy, about power, about a man who sold discipline and control while failing at the simplest promise. At 10:03 a.m., Julian's phone finally began to buzz upstairs. Once, twice, then non-stop. Hannah heard him stir, heard the bed shift, heard the sharp intake of breath when he checked his screen. He came down fast this time, tie undone, hair still damp. "Why didn't you tell me?" he snapped, holding up his phone like an accusation. "Tell you what?" Hannah asked softly, though she already knew. "This," he said, "this mess." Hannah looked at the screen. Messages from partners, from compliance, from people who had never bothered to learn her name. The same question repeated in different words. "Is this true?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself. She only said one thing. "I didn't post it." Julian's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back to her. He understood. That was the moment his confidence cracked. Across the city, an ethics officer named Lucas Reed read the post again. Slowly, carefully. He opened a folder he had not touched in months. Patterns mattered. Timing mattered. And this time, there was a child's truth attached to the evidence. As Julian began drafting apologies, he didn't mean a much quieter process had already begun behind closed doors. Because when Manhattan starts asking questions, it never stops until someone falls. Julian didn't apologize. Not at first. He paced the living room with his phone pressed to his ear, lowering his voice every time he passed the hallway, as if Hannah were the one who had done something wrong. She watched him from the kitchen, her hands wrapped tightly around a cold mug of coffee she hadn't touched. "It's being handled," Julian said sharply into the phone. "Yes, I understand the optics. No, it's not what it looks like." He hung up and turned to her, frustration written all over his face. "Why would you let him post something like that?" he demanded. "You know how sensitive things are right now." Hannah blinked. The accusation landed harder than any confession could have. "He's a child," she replied quietly. "He misses his father." Julian scoffed and ran a hand through his hair. "That's not the point. People are twisting this. They're assuming things." "Are they wrong?" Hannah asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Julian's eyes narrowed, and for a split second, the mask slipped. Then it was back in place, calm, controlled, familiar. "You're overreacting," he said. "This is just noise. It'll blow over." End quote. He sat down across from her, leaning forward, lowering his voice the way he did when he wanted compliance. "You know how my world works, Hannah. Perception matters. One misunderstanding can cost millions. Do you really want to be responsible for that?" Responsible. The word stung. For years, she had carried everything else, the house, the child, the emotional weight of his ambition. Now he was placing this on her too. "I didn't do anything," she said. Julian exhaled slowly, as if she were exhausting him. Then, help me fix it, delete the post, make him take it down. Say it was a mistake. Hannah thought of Eli's face when he pressed publish. Proud, hopeful, loving. No, she said. Julian froze. What did you say? I said no, Hannah repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm not making him feel guilty for telling the truth. Julian stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. You're not thinking clearly, he snapped. You don't understand what's at stake. Hannah met his gaze for the first time that morning. I understand exactly what's at stake. Upstairs, Eli shifted in his sleep, unaware that his parents' marriage was now a battlefield. Julian grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I'll handle this, he said coldly. Just stay out of the way. As the door slammed shut, Hannah realized something had changed inside her. The lie Julian told Best wasn't to the world. It was the one where he believed she would always stay silent. And for the first time, Hannah knew she wouldn't. The apartment felt different after Julian left. Not louder, not quieter, just hollow, like something important had been removed without permission. Hannah stood by the window for a long time, watching the city move as if nothing had happened. Cars flowed, people hurried to work. Somewhere, lives continued uninterrupted. Inside her chest, everything was breaking in slow motion. Her phone buzzed again. And again. She didn't pick it up. She already knew what it would be. Messages asking if she was okay. Messages pretending concern while fishing for information. Messages that treated her pain like entertainment. Hannah turned the phone face down. Eli woke up an hour later. He padded into the living room in his socks, rubbing his eyes, still half asleep. Did Dad go to work? He asked softly. Yes, Hannah said. The word tasted bitter. Eli nodded, then frowned. Mom, did I do something wrong? Her heart shattered. She knelt in front of him immediately, taking his small hands in hers. No, absolutely not. You didn't do anything wrong. But people are talking, he whispered. I heard your phone. Hannah pulled him into her arms, holding him tighter than she ever had. Sometimes, she said carefully, telling the truth makes adults uncomfortable. That doesn't mean the truth is bad. Eli nodded slowly, though confusion still clouded his face. He trusted her. That trust felt heavier than anything else in the room. After he went back to his drawings, Hannah finally looked at her phone. There were emails now, not just messages. One from a number she didn't recognize, another from an address ending in a corporate domain. Then one subject line made her stomach twist. Request for clarification. She didn't open it. For years, Hannah had believed silence was strength, that staying quiet was how you protected the people you loved. But now, her silence was being interpreted as something else entirely. Consent. Across the city, conversations were happening without her. Decisions were forming without her voice. Her quiet was becoming a blank space others were eager to fill. She sat down at the table, hands trembling slightly, and opened her laptop for the first time in months. The screen reflected her face back at her, tired, pale, but awake. She didn't type a statement. She didn't post a defense. She didn't explain. She saved screenshots, dates, times, messages Julian had sent over the years. Apologies that weren't apologies. Promises that led nowhere. Every piece of silence she had swallowed became evidence. Upstairs, Julian was still telling his version of the story. Polished, strategic, controlled. But Hannah was done disappearing. Because when silence lasts too long, it stops being protection. It becomes proof. And Hannah had finally realized that saying nothing was no longer an option. At 1:27 p.m., the first image appeared. It was posted to a private Instagram story, meant for a carefully selected audience. Only close friends, only people who understood discretion, or so Brielle Knox believed. The photo showed 2 champagne flutes on a marble table. A woman's manicured hand rested lightly near one glass. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable, was a hotel window framing the Manhattan skyline. The caption was short, playful, and careless. Some nights deserve no explanation. Brielle smiled when she posted it. She had no idea the internet was already hunting. Within minutes, someone recognized the view. Another recognized the table. A third matched the timestamp with the child's viral post from that morning. Screenshots spread faster than Brielle's confidence ever had. By the time she realized something was wrong, it was too late. Hannah saw the image while folding laundry. Her phone buzzed, this time not with concern, but with urgency. A message from someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Is this her? Hannah opened the attachment. Her hands went cold. The woman in the photo looked effortless, expensive, untouched by consequence, the kind of woman who never wondered if she had done something wrong. Hannah felt a sharp ache, but it passed quickly. What remained was clarity. This wasn't love. This was arrogance. Across town, Julian stared at his phone in disbelief. He had told Brielle to stay quiet, to stay invisible, to let him control the narrative. Her post shattered that illusion completely. Take it down, he texted. Now. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Brielle hesitated. For the first time, she felt the shift. The tone online had changed. This wasn't admiration anymore. It was accusation. The comments beneath the reposted screenshot were brutal. Does she know about the kid? Imagine flexing while a child waits up. This isn't cute, it's cruel. Brielle deleted the story. But deletion wasn't enough. The screenshots lived on, untouchable, multiplying with every attempt to erase them. Her name surfaced. Her past posts were dissected. Patterns emerged. Other men, other hotels, other unexplained nights. Eza. Brielle sat on the edge of her bed, heart racing, realization sinking in. Julian wasn't powerful enough to protect her from this, and she wasn't willing to drown with him. She opened her messages, scrolling past Julian's demands, past the threats, past the promises. Then she typed a new message to someone else. Someone who had reached out quietly an hour earlier. Let's talk, she wrote. Back in the apartment, Hannah closed her phone and exhaled slowly. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't exposed anyone. But the mistress had. And the first crack in Julian's carefully built world was now impossible to hide. Julian moved fast. By mid-afternoon, his apartment no longer felt like a home. It felt like a temporary command center. His laptop was open on the kitchen island, his phone pressed constantly to his ear, notifications stacking faster than he could read them. He wasn't panicking. Not yet. He was doing what he always did when things slipped out of his control. He tried to dominate them. Get it flagged, he said sharply. It involves a minor. That should be enough. A pause. No, I don't care how many times it's been shared. Make it disappear. He hung up and immediately dialed another number. Public relations. Legal. Crisis management. Names Hannah had heard whispered before. People who specialized in cleaning messes made by powerful men. Hannah watched from the doorway, invisible to him. She noticed how he never once mentioned Eli by name. To Julian, their son wasn't a child caught in the middle. He was a liability. They're asking for a statement, Julian said, finally acknowledging her presence. We need to be aligned. We? Hannah asked quietly. Yes, he snapped. This is still our family. Hannah almost laughed. Almost. Julian paced again, running through options out loud. We say it was a scheduling glitch, or a joke, or a hacked account. Kids click things they don't understand all the time. End of fort. You want to say our son lied? Hannah asked. Julian stopped. His eyes hardened. I want this to stop. At 3:42 p.m., the first takedown request went through. At 3:46, it failed. The screenshots were too widespread, too many reposts, too many accounts outside his reach. For every image removed, 3 more appeared somewhere else. Anonymous accounts surfaced with captions that needed no explanation. You can't delete the truth. Funny how silence works until it doesn't. Thanks for watching. Julian slammed his phone down. This is insane, he muttered. They're crucifying me over nothing. Hannah stepped closer. It's not nothing. He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time that day. You're enjoying this, he accused. You always wanted to punish me. The accusation was so absurd it left Hannah speechless. She shook her head slowly. I wanted you to come home, she said. That's all. Julian turned away, already dialing again. I'll fix it, he said. I always do. But even as he spoke, another alert flashed across his screen. A compliance notice, a request for internal review. The internet hadn't slowed. And for the first time, Julian was realizing something terrifying. This was bigger than him. Because once the truth spreads beyond your control, No amount of power can pull it back. The threat came that evening, quietly. Julian waited until Eli was asleep. Hannah knew it was intentional. He always chose moments when witnesses couldn't speak for themselves. The apartment lights were dim, the city outside glowing with careless indifference. Julian stood by the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. "This can't continue," he said flatly, without turning around. Hannah folded her arms, bracing herself. "What do you mean?" "I mean the damage," Julian replied. "The attention, the speculation. It's not healthy for Eli." The words sounded almost reasonable, almost concerned. Hannah felt a chill anyway. "You're right," she said cautiously. "This isn't healthy for him." Julian finally faced her. His expression softened, practiced and calculated. "Which is why we need to think long-term. Stability, structure, normalcy." Hannah's stomach tightened. "Say what you're really saying." Julian sighed, as if she were being difficult. "If this escalates," he said, "people will start questioning your judgment. A mother who lets her child post things that cause international embarrassment? That doesn't look good." Hannah stared at him. "You're blaming me." "I'm being realistic," he corrected. "Courts care about optics, so do schools, so do therapists." There it was. The line he had never crossed before, now laid bare between them. "You wouldn't?" Hannah whispered. Julian stepped closer. "I would do whatever it takes to protect my son." The irony was almost unbearable. "Protect him from what?" she asked. "The truth?" Julian's jaw tightened. "From chaos, from instability, from you spiraling." Hannah felt the room tilt. For years, she had swallowed discomfort to keep the peace. Now he was using her greatest fear against her. Losing Eli wasn't just a threat, it was annihilation. "You think I won't fight?" she asked, her voice shaking. Julian smiled thinly. "With what resources?" The question landed with surgical precision. He knew exactly where she stood. No income, no recent work history, no powerful friends, just a reputation built on silence. "I'm giving you a chance," Julian continued. "Take the post down. Release a statement, say it was a misunderstanding. Do that, and this stays private." Hannah looked toward the hallway, where Eli slept peacefully, unaware that his safety had become leverage. Slowly, Hannah lifted her chin. "You don't get to threaten me with my child," she said. Julian's smile vanished. "Think carefully." She did. And for the first time, Hannah understood the depth of the danger she was in. Because the man she married wasn't just capable of betrayal. He was capable of cruelty. And now, the fight was no longer about truth, it was about survival. That night, Hannah didn't sleep at all. She lay on the couch with the lights off, staring at the faint outline of the ceiling fan as it turned slowly above her. Each rotation felt like time mocking her. The apartment was quiet, but inside her head, everything was screaming. Julian had gone to bed without another word, as if threatening to take their child had been just another business tactic. As if she were a problem to manage, not a woman he once promised to love. Hannah checked the time. 2:14 a.m. Her phone buzzed softly beside her. She flinched, afraid it might be another message from Julian's lawyers, or worse, another reminder of how powerless she was becoming. But it wasn't. It was her bank app. The balance refreshed automatically, a habit she had never questioned before. The number on the screen made her chest tighten. Julian had moved money, not all of it. Just enough to send a message. She refreshed again, hoping it was a glitch. It wasn't. The shared account they used for groceries, school supplies, and emergencies was nearly empty. Hannah felt the air leave her lungs. This was rock bottom. Not the scandal, not the betrayal. This quiet moment where survival suddenly felt uncertain. She sat up slowly, wrapping a blanket around herself, and tried to think clearly. Rent, food, Eli's therapy appointments, everything depended on access she no longer had. Upstairs, Julian slept like a man who believed he was winning. Hannah went into the bathroom and locked the door. She sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, pressing her hand over her mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. She had never felt so alone. Not even when she left her job. Not even when she realized her marriage was breaking. This was different. This was fear. Her phone buzzed again. She almost ignored it. Almost. Unknown number. She stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hello?" she whispered. "Hannah Whitmore?" A calm male voice asked. Yes. My name is Lucas Reed. I know this is unexpected, but I believe you may need help. Her heart pounded. How did you get this number? I oversee ethics and compliance for a firm connected to your husband's work, he said carefully. And I've been watching this situation develop. Hannah closed her eyes. She was too tired to be polite. I can't talk right now. I understand, Lucas replied, but I need you to know something. You're not as powerless as he wants you to believe. The words hit her harder than she expected. I'm not asking you to trust me, Lucas continued. Just don't make any decisions tonight. Tomorrow, things will look different. The call ended. Hannah sat there long after, phone still in her hand. For the first time since Julian's threat, a small crack of light appeared. Because rock bottom had a sound, and tonight it had just shifted. Morning arrived without relief. Hannah stood at the kitchen sink, watching steam rise from a pot of oatmeal she hadn't eaten. Eli sat at the table, quietly lining up his crayons, unusually silent. The apartment felt tense, like it was waiting for something to break. At 9:07 a. Next, the doorbell rang. Hannah froze. Her first thought was Julian. Her second was panic. She wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door carefully. A man stood in the hallway, mid-40s, calm eyes, neatly dressed, but not flashy. No suit jacket, no arrogance, just presence. Hannah Whitmore? He asked gently. Yes. I'm Lucas Reed. We spoke briefly last night. Her heart raced. She glanced back at Eli, then stepped aside. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I know, Lucas said, but this conversation can't happen over the phone. They sat across from each other at the table. Lucas placed a slim folder between them, but didn't open it yet. I want to be clear, he began. I'm not here on Julian's behalf. In fact, I'm here because of him. Hannah folded her arms. You work with him. Time. If you knew Savan, I oversee ethics and compliance for an external firm tied to his fund, Lucas replied. Which means I investigate patterns most people miss. Hannah's stomach tightened. Patterns of what? Lucas finally opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, timestamps, calendar entries, and expense logs. Hotel names repeated. Cities, dates. This didn't start last week, Lucas said, and it didn't start with one woman. Hannah stared at the pages, her hands trembling. Each line confirmed something she had felt for years, but never allowed herself to name. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Because Julian isn't just exposed publicly, Lucas said. He's exposed professionally, and he knows it. Hannah's chest tightened. He threatened to take my son. Lucas's expression hardened. That was a mistake. She looked up sharply. The moment he did that, Lucas continued, he crossed from reputation risk into ethical violation, and courts take that seriously. Hannah swallowed hard. I have no money, no lawyer. Lucas slid a card across the table. You will. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing today, Lucas said. Just your consent to tell the truth when asked. And your permission to protect you and your child. Eli looked up from his crayons. Mom? Hannah reached for him instinctively, pulling him close. She looked back at Lucas. If I do this, she said, voice shaking, everything changes. Thanks for watching. Lucas nodded. Yes. Hannah exhaled slowly. For the first time since the night Julian came home at dawn, she wasn't reacting. She was choosing. And somewhere across the city, Julian Whitmore had no idea his control was already slipping away. Lucas didn't rush her. He understood shock had a rhythm, and Hannah was still finding hers. After Eli left for school, escorted by a neighbor who asked no questions, Lucas reopened the folder he had brought and slid it closer to her. These are copies, he said. Everything is preserved elsewhere. Hannah nodded, eyes scanning the pages again. Hotel receipts, late-night car services, calendar blocks marked private. The repetition was what made her stomach turn. This wasn't an accident. It was a system. There's more, Lucas added quietly. He pulled out a second set of documents, emails between Julian and his assistant, messages requesting schedule adjustments. One line appeared again and again. Make sure compliance is not looped. Hannah felt a strange calm settle over her. He knew, she said. He always knew. Yes, Lucas replied, and he counted on your silence. Hannah closed the folder. Why now? She asked. Why step in today? Lucas leaned back slightly. Because yesterday, a child told the truth publicly, and because last night, Julian attempted financial coercion. That combination changes everything. Hannah's throat tightened. He moved money. End quote. We saw it, Lucas said. It triggered internal alerts. She looked up sharply. You were already watching. We were waiting, Lucas corrected, for something undeniable. Lucas stood and walked toward the window, hands in his pockets. There's an internal ethics committee meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Julian doesn't know I'm involved yet. Hannah's pulse quickened. What happens at that meeting? Lucas turned back to her. If the committee proceeds, Julian will be suspended pending investigation. His access will be frozen. Accounts, systems, influence. Hannah felt dizzy. And if it doesn't? Then he'll try to crush this quietly, Lucas said, starting with you. Silence filled the room again, heavier than before. I can't afford a war, Hannah whispered. Lucas met her gaze. You can't afford not to fight. She thought of Eli, of the way he'd asked if he had done something wrong, of the fear in Julian's voice when control slipped for just a second. What do you need from me? She asked. Nothing public, Lucas said. Not yet. Just documentation. Your permission to share what you've already saved, and your agreement not to recant under pressure. Hannah inhaled deeply. For years, she had been trained to bend, to smooth things over, to protect everyone but herself. She reached for the pen Lucas placed on the table and signed the consent form without shaking. I won't lie anymore, she said. Lucas nodded once. Then neither will we. As he left, Hannah locked the door behind him and leaned against it, heart racing. Across the city, Julian opened his laptop to an access denial message he had never seen before. And for the first time, he realized the files he forgot might be the ones that destroyed him. The call came just after noon. Julian was in his office, staring at the frozen login screen on his laptop when his phone vibrated across the desk. Unknown number. He ignored it, then it rang again. And again. He answered on the fourth ring. What? Brielle's voice was low, clipped, stripped of charm. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Julian snapped. You already did enough. She laughed once, sharply. Don't pretend this is my fault. You promised protection. I promised discretion, Julian said. You didn't listen. There was a pause on the line, long enough for him to sense the shift. Brielle was no longer afraid. She was calculating. I was contacted this morning, she said, by someone from your world. Ethics, compliance. They asked questions you didn't warn me about. Julian's grip tightened around the phone. You talked to them? I didn't have a choice, Brielle replied. They already had receipts, dates, locations. They just wanted confirmation. Mistress. You gave them nothing, Julian said. It wasn't a question. Brielle exhaled slowly. I gave them what protected me. The words landed like a punch. You sold me out, Julian said. No, she corrected. I survived you. She continued before he could speak. You told me you were untouchable, that your wife would stay quiet, that your firm would look the other way. You were wrong on all counts. Julian stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. You think this ends well for you? It already has, Brielle said calmly. I cooperated early. I documented everything. Messages, hotel bookings, transfers. You trained me to keep records, remember? Silence swallowed the line. I won't be your shield, Brielle added, and I won't be your fall guy. She hung up. Julian stared at his phone, chest heaving. For the first time since this began, there was no angle left to play, no leverage, no loyal ally. Across the city, Hannah sat at the table with Lucas on speakerphone. She listened without interrupting as he summarized the call his office had just received. She confirmed the timeline, Lucas said, and provided corroborating evidence. It strengthens the case significantly. Hannah closed her eyes. She felt no triumph, only a strange, heavy relief. What happens now? She asked. The committee moves forward, Lucas replied, and Julian loses control of the narrative entirely. I heavega. Hannah glanced at the hallway where Eli's backpack rested against the wall. She thought of how close Julian had come to using him as a weapon. Thank you, she said quietly. When the call ended, Hannah sat alone, hands folded, breathing evenly. Julian had believed betrayal was something he controlled. He was wrong. because the woman he used was now the one pulling the final thread. The meeting began at 8:30 a.m. sharp. Julian arrived early, as he always did, wearing a tailored suit that usually commanded respect the moment he entered a room. Today, no one stood to greet him. The glass-walled conference room felt colder than usual, the skyline behind it distant and unforgiving. 3 members of the ethics committee sat across the table, laptops open, expressions neutral. Lucas Reed occupied a seat slightly apart, a legal pad resting neatly in front of him. Julian forced a smile. "I assume this is about the noise online," he said, taking his seat. "I'm happy to clarify." No one responded. The chairwoman finally spoke. "This is not about social media. This is about conduct." She slid a folder across the table. Julian recognized it immediately. His breath caught before he could stop himself. Inside were timelines, receipts, screenshots, confirmations from multiple sources. The evidence wasn't dramatic. It was methodical, clean, impossible to argue with. "We have corroboration from internal audits," she continued, "external witnesses, and voluntary cooperation from third parties." Julian's jaw tightened. "You're basing this on a personal matter." Lucas spoke for the first time. "We're basing this on repeated violations of ethics policy, misuse of firm resources, and attempted financial coercion." Julian's head snapped toward him. "You had no authority." "I do," Lucas said calmly, "and so does the committee." The room fell silent again. The chairwoman leaned forward. "Effective immediately. Your access is suspended pending full investigation. You are to return all company devices today. You will not contact staff. You will not represent the firm in any capacity." Julian felt the floor drop out from beneath him. "This is premature," he said, voice tight. "You're destroying my career over assumptions." "We're protecting the firm," she replied, "from risk you created." Julian stood abruptly. "You'll regret this." Dan ported, too. No one flinched. Across the city, Hannah sat in a quiet waiting room with Eli beside her, his small fingers wrapped around hers. She didn't know the details yet, only that something irreversible was happening. At 9:17 a.m., Julian's company email account was deactivated. At 9:22, his firm's website removed his name. At 9:30, the first financial news alert hit inboxes across Manhattan. Senior partner placed on leave pending ethics review. Julian stared at his phone, refreshing the screen, watching his identity disappear line by line. For years, he had believed power insulated him from consequence. This morning proved otherwise. Because when institutions turn their backs, even the strongest men fall alone. The first request came quietly. It wasn't a reporter chasing headlines or a blogger looking for clicks. It was an email from a nonprofit media outlet that focused on family advocacy and corporate accountability. The subject line was careful, almost gentle. "We would like to hear your voice, if you're willing." Hannah stared at the screen for a long time before answering. For days, the world had spoken about her without ever speaking to her. Analysts debated ethics. Comment sections dissected morality. Strangers argued over facts they barely understood. No one had asked how it felt to be her. Lucas read the email over her shoulder. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Not now, not ever." "And I know," Hannah replied. "But if I don't, someone else will tell my story for me." They arranged a short interview. No cameras, no live stream, just words. When the call began, Hannah's voice shook for the first 30 seconds. Then it steadied. "I didn't plan for any of this," she said. "I wasn't trying to expose anyone. I was trying to protect my child." She spoke about silence, about how easy it is to mistake endurance for strength, about how often women are told that holding a family together means holding themselves apart. She didn't insult Julian. She didn't name the mistress. She didn't ask for sympathy. She told the truth. "My son believed his father was working late," she said softly. "I believed it too. For a long time. When the truth came out, my priority was making sure my child didn't believe love was a mistake." The article went live the next morning. The reaction was immediate and unexpected. The comments shifted. The tone changed. People stopped speculating and started listening. Mothers wrote about their own silences. Fathers wrote about regret. Therapists shared the peace. Advocacy groups reached out. Hannah's name stopped being attached to scandal and started being attached to resilience. Julian watched it unfold from his apartment, blinds drawn, phone buzzing with messages he no longer answered. For the first time, the narrative wasn't about him. It never had been. That afternoon, Hannah picked Eli up from school. A teacher pulled her aside and squeezed her hand gently. "He's brave," she said. "So are you." Eli looked up at his mother. "Did I do okay?" he asked. Hannah knelt beside him, smiling through tears. "You did more than okay." That night, Hannah sat by the window again, but this time, the city didn't feel indifferent. It felt awake. Because when the truth is finally told by the right voice, it doesn't destroy, it heals. The shift was subtle at first. Hannah noticed it in the quiet moments, not in headlines. Fewer accusatory messages, more invitations that didn't ask her to justify herself. People weren't demanding answers anymore, they were offering space. An editor from a parenting magazine emailed her, asking permission to reprint a single quote. A counselor association asked if she would allow her story to be shared anonymously with trainees. A local nonprofit left a voicemail, saying they had resources if she needed them. For the first time, the world wasn't watching her fall. It was watching her stand. Julian, on the other hand, felt the ground disappear completely. His phone no longer buzzed with opportunity, it buzzed with silence. The friends who once answered on the first ring now sent polite, delayed replies. Some didn't reply at all. Invitations vanished. Meetings were canceled until further notice. Heaven Dom. If you won. He scrolled through articles late at night, noticing something that made his chest tighten. His name was no longer the focus. Hannah's was. Not as a victim, not as a wife, but as a woman who protected her child when it mattered most. The public conversation had turned. People questioned power instead of gossip. They asked why institutions ignored patterns for so long, why women were expected to endure quietly, why a child's honesty had done what audits never did. Julian read one comment over and over again. He lost control the moment he thought silence meant loyalty. Meanwhile, Hannah sat in a modest office with a woman from a community foundation. No cameras, no scripts, just a conversation. "We'd like to fund a pilot program," the woman said. "School-based counseling for kids dealing with family disruption. Led by someone who understands." Hannah felt her breath catch. "I haven't practiced in years." End quote. "Your license is knowing," the woman replied gently. "Your experience is the rest." That afternoon, Hannah walked home with Eli, holding his hand as they crossed the street. He looked lighter, freer, like the weight he never named had finally lifted. "Mom," he said suddenly, "people at school said you were brave." Hannah smiled. "What do you think?" Eli thought for a moment. "I think you just didn't lie." That night, Hannah opened her laptop and drafted a proposal. Not to explain herself. Not to defend the past. But to build something new. Because the story had changed sides. And this time, the world was listening to the right voice. The papers were delivered on a Tuesday morning. Not by a sheriff, not with drama. Just a plain envelope slipped under Julian's apartment door, the sound barely audible over the hum of the city. Inside were documents he never believed he would see presented this way. Prepared, precise, final. Julian read the first page twice, then a third time, his jaw tightening with each line. This wasn't a plea, it wasn't a negotiation, it was a declaration. Hannah wasn't asking for permission anymore. Across town, Hannah sat in a small conference room with her attorney and Lucas beside her. Sunlight filtered through the window, warm and steady, nothing like the chaos she had lived inside for weeks. "You don't have to rush this," the attorney said gently. "But everything is in place, if you're ready." Hannah nodded. She was ready. The terms were clear. Full physical custody of Eli, primary residence with her, financial transparency enforced by court order, no leverage, no private threats, no backroom games. Julian would have visitation, supervised at first, not as punishment, but as protection. "He's going to fight this," the attorney warned. "I know," Hannah replied calmly. "But he won't win." And for the first time, she believed it. Julian's response came fast. Angry emails, accusations, claims that Hannah was being manipulated, that she was destroying the family. She didn't reply. Instead, she watched as his legal team struggled to counter evidence they couldn't erase. Financial coercion, recorded threats, witness testimony, a paper trail that told the story without emotion. When Julian finally saw Hannah in person, it was in a neutral office, with lawyers present and rules enforced. "You're doing this to hurt me," he said, his voice low and bitter. Hannah met his eyes without flinching. "I'm doing this to protect our son." Julian laughed humorlessly. "You think you've won?" "I think Eli will sleep at night," she said. "That's enough." The room went quiet. Later that day, Hannah signed the final page with a steady hand. No tears, no shaking, just clarity. She stepped outside afterward, breathing in the cool air, feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Relief. That evening, she cooked dinner with Eli, laughing when he spilled sauce on the counter. Ordinary moments felt extraordinary now. Julian still had power, still had money, still had pride. But Hannah had something he no longer controlled: her future. And as the ink dried on the divorce papers, one truth became unavoidable. This time, the ending was hers to write. The change didn't happen all at once. It began with silence. Eli stopped asking about his father. At first, Hannah worried that was worse. Children were supposed to ask questions, to demand answers, but this silence felt different. It wasn't fear, it wasn't confusion, it was something quieter, something heavier. One afternoon, Hannah found Eli sitting on the floor of his room, his old iPad turned face down beside him. He was drawing carefully, his tongue pressed against his lip, the way he did when something mattered. "What are you working on?" she asked gently. Eli hesitated, then held up the paper. It showed 3 figures holding hands. 2 were labeled Mom and Me. The third was just a shape, no name. Hannah's throat tightened. "Who's that?" Eli shrugged. "I don't know yet." She sat beside him, saying nothing. She had learned that rushing children toward clarity only made them retreat further. That night, after dinner, Eli finally spoke. "I think Dad was mad because of me," he said quietly, staring at his plate. "If I didn't post that thing, none of this would have happened." Hannah felt her chest ache. She reached across the table and gently lifted his chin so he had to look at her. "Listen to me very carefully," she said. "None of this happened because of you. It happened because adults made choices, bad ones." Eli's eyes filled with tears. But he said, "I know," Hannah interrupted softly, "and he was wrong." She took a breath, choosing her words with care. Telling the truth never breaks a family. Lying does. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly, like someone letting go of something they had been carrying for too long. The following week, Hannah took him to a child therapist recommended by the school. The sessions were gentle, unhurried. No forcing, no blame, just space. After the 3rd visit, the therapist smiled at Hannah. "He's resilient," she said. "He just needed to know the truth wasn't his fault." Indira. That night, Eli slept through without waking up. No nightmares. No whispered apologies into the dark. Hannah stood in the doorway of his room for a long time, watching his chest rise and fall, feeling something finally loosen inside her. Julian had tried to turn their child into leverage. Instead, Eli had found peace. And Hannah understood something profound in that moment. Healing didn't come from revenge. It came from removing guilt where it never belonged. And for the first time since that night at dawn, her son was free. Hannah's new life did not begin with applause. It began with mornings, quiet ones, the kind where sunlight crept through the curtains instead of crashing in like bad news, where coffee brewed slowly, where no one checked their phone before saying good morning. Their new apartment was smaller, farther from the skyline Julian once prized, but it felt lighter. Hannah let Eli pick the paint for his room. He chose a soft blue and insisted they paint it together. They laughed when they made a mess, blue streaks on their hands, footprints on the floor they forgot to cover. For the first time in years, mistakes didn't feel dangerous. Hannah returned to work gradually. Not full-time, not yet. She started with 2 mornings a week at a community center, helping children who struggled to speak what they felt. Parents recognized her sometimes. They never said much, just a quiet nod, a look of understanding. That was enough. One afternoon, after a session ran long, Hannah sat alone in the empty office, staring at her old certification hanging crooked on the wall. She had almost forgotten who she was before survival became her full-time job. She straightened the frame. At home, Eli was changing too. He slept better, ate better. He stopped flinching at raised voices on television. When Hannah asked how school was, he no longer shrugged. He talked about friends, about a science project, about how he wanted to build something that tells the truth even when it's hard. Hannah listened, heart full. Julian still existed, somewhere on the edges of their lives. Emails routed through lawyers, scheduled visits that felt stiff and careful. Eli returned from them quieter but no longer broken. One evening, as they washed dishes together, Eli looked up at her suddenly. "Mom," he said, "I like our life now." Hannah swallowed. "Me too. Different." She realized then that rebuilding wasn't about replacing what was lost. It was about choosing what deserved to stay gone. Later that night, Hannah sat by the window with her laptop open, reviewing a proposal for the counseling program she was helping design. Funding was approved. The pilot would launch in 3 schools. Her name was on the first page. Not as someone's wife. Not as a scandal. Just as herself. She closed the laptop and exhaled, feeling steady in a way she hadn't felt in years. Somewhere behind her, Eli slept peacefully, one arm thrown over his pillow, breathing slow and even. The truth had cost them everything they thought they needed, but it had given them something far better. A life that finally belonged to them. And in the quiet that followed, Hannah knew they were no longer surviving, they were living. Lucas did not arrive like a rescue. That mattered to Hannah. He didn't show up with grand gestures or promises. He didn't frame himself as the answer to her pain. He simply stayed consistent, which, after everything, felt revolutionary. Their connection grew slowly, almost quietly, in the margins of everything else. Emails about program logistics turned into brief check-ins. Check-ins became conversations that wandered into evenings. Even then, Lucas never crossed a line Hannah hadn't clearly drawn. He knew she had survived a man who confused control with love. One afternoon, after a long meeting at the community center, Lucas walked her to her car. The city hummed around them, busy and indifferent, the way it always did. "You don't owe anyone a timeline," he said casually, as if reading her thoughts. Hannah smiled faintly. "I know." "I'm serious," Lucas added. "Not me. Not the world. Not even the future version of yourself." That was when she realized something. He wasn't waiting for her to become available. He was already present. Eli noticed before she did. One evening, while Hannah and Lucas were reviewing paperwork at the kitchen table, Eli wandered in with his homework. He studied Lucas for a moment, then asked, "Are you staying for dinner?" Lucas glanced at Hannah. "Only if that's okay." Eli nodded once. "Mom's cooking. That means yes." Hannah laughed despite herself. Dinner was simple. Pasta, salad, no pretense. Lucas listened more than he spoke, never forcing conversation, never filling silence just to be heard. When Eli explained a school project, Lucas paid attention like it mattered. Because it did. Later, as Eli brushed his teeth, Hannah stood at the sink beside Lucas, rinsing plates. The moment felt strangely normal. "I don't want to rush," Hannah said quietly. Lucas nodded. "Neither do I." There was no pressure in his voice, no disappointment, just agreement. Weeks passed, then months. Lucas became part of the background of their lives. School events, program milestones, late-night phone calls when Hannah doubted herself. He never tried to replace anyone. He never tried to compete with the past. He respected it. One night, after Eli had gone to bed, Hannah and Lucas sat on the couch, not touching, just close enough to feel each other's presence. "You're safe here," Lucas said, not as a promise indicates, but as a fact. Hannah felt something open inside her that fear had kept sealed for years. She didn't fall in love loudly. She chose it carefully. And for the first time, the man beside her wasn't asking her to disappear to make him feel whole. He was standing with her, exactly where she was. The ceremony was small. No press, no spectacle, no carefully curated guest list designed to impress strangers. Just a quiet garden on the edge of the city, soft light filtering through trees, and people who had earned the right to be there. Hannah stood barefoot on the grass, holding Eli's hand. He wore a simple suit and a smile that reached his eyes, the kind she hadn't seen in years. When he squeezed her fingers, she squeezed back. Across from them, Lucas waited. There was no dramatic pause when Hannah walked toward him. No fear, no second guessing. Just a calm certainty that settled into her chest like it belonged there. The officiant spoke about resilience, about honesty, about choosing partnership instead of control. Hannah barely heard the words. She was watching Eli. When it was time for vows, Hannah didn't promise forever out of obligation. She promised truth, safety, presence. Lucas promised the same. Eli stepped forward at the end, holding a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something," he said, voice steady. He cleared his throat. "My mom taught me that heroes don't disappear. They stay, even when it's hard." Hannah covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Julian wasn't invited. He watched the photos later, alone in a quiet apartment that felt too large for one person. His career never recovered. The investigation closed without criminal charges, but the damage was permanent. Firms remembered, people whispered, doors stayed shut. He had lost the things he thought made him powerful. Hannah had gained everything that mattered. That evening, after the last guests left, Hannah, Lucas, and Eli sat on the porch, sharing cake straight from the box. Eli laughed when frosting got on his nose. Hannah laughed too, a sound that felt new and familiar at the same time. "Mom," Eli said suddenly, "do you still remember the post I made?" Hannah nodded. "I do. I'm glad I didn't delete it," he said. Hannah kissed the top of his head. "So am I. If you reach or opened it, that are over opened it, if you came today," because that post hadn't destroyed their lives. It had revealed them. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Hannah leaned into Lucas's shoulder, watching her son chase fireflies across the yard. She understood something clearly now. The hero of this story was never the man who came home at dawn. It was the woman who stopped being silent, the child who told the truth, and the life they chose afterward. And for the first time, the ending wasn't just happy, it was earned. So, the story has come to an end. And if you're still here with us right now, truly still here, then maybe something in this journey touched your heart in a quiet but undeniable way. What this story reminds us is simple, yet powerful. Truth is never the enemy, fear is. For a long time, Hannah believed silence would keep her family safe. Many of us do. We stay quiet to avoid conflict, to protect peace, to hold things together. But as the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Healing begins the moment we stop betraying ourselves. Another Stoic truth from Epictetus teaches us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Hannah could not control betrayal, gossip, or loss, but she could choose integrity, courage, and love for her child. And that choice changed everything. This story isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming dignity. It's about understanding that walking away from what hurts you is not weakness, it's wisdom. Sometimes life doesn't fall apart, it falls into place. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that heal, inspire, and remind us all that even after the darkest night, a truthful dawn always comes. The papers were delivered on a Tuesday morning, not by a sheriff, not with drama. Just a plain envelope slipped under Julian's apartment door, the sound barely audible over the hum of the city. Inside were documents he never believed he would see presented this way. Prepared, precise, final. Julian read the first page twice, then a third time, his jaw tightening with each line. This wasn't a plea, it wasn't a negotiation, it was a declaration. Hannah wasn't asking for permission anymore. Across town, Hannah sat in a small conference room with her attorney and Lucas beside her. Sunlight filtered through the window, warm and steady, nothing like the chaos she had lived inside for weeks. "You don't have to rush this," the attorney said gently, "but everything is in place if you're ready." Hannah nodded. She was ready. The terms were clear. Full physical custody of Eli, primary residence with her, financial transparency enforced by court order, no leverage, no private threats, no backroom games. Julian would have visitation, supervised at first, not as punishment, but as protection. "He's going to fight this," the attorney warned. "I know," Hannah replied calmly, "but he won't win." And for the first time, she believed it. Julian's response came fast. Angry emails, accusations, claims that Hannah was being manipulated, that she was destroying the family. She didn't reply. Instead, She watched as his legal team struggled to counter evidence they couldn't erase. Financial coercion, recorded threats, witness testimony, a paper trail that told the story without emotion. When Julian finally saw Hannah in person, it was in a neutral office, with lawyers present and rules enforced. "You're doing this to hurt me," he said, his voice low and bitter. Hannah met his eyes without flinching. "I'm doing this to protect our son." Julian laughed humorlessly. "You think you've won?" "I think Eli will sleep at night," she said. "That's enough." Indispresses. The room went quiet. Later that day, Hannah signed the final page with a steady hand. No tears, no shaking, just clarity. She stepped outside afterward, breathing in the cool air, feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Relief? That evening, she cooked dinner with Eli, laughing when he spilled sauce on the counter. Ordinary moments felt extraordinary now. Julian still had power, still had money, still had pride, but Hannah had something he no longer controlled: her future. And as the ink dried on the divorce papers, one truth became unavoidable. This time, the ending was hers to write.